Woohoo! I'm getting fired up for the next How to Lead Circle class coming together to begin the Level 1 certification training starting March 29th. And wanted to dive into a very important conversation today about the importance of women's circles and how they are an integral part of balancing the masculine and feminine energies on the planet. This is episode 17. Welcome to the Brave Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Lynn, founder of Sistership Circle and author of Open Your Heart and The Art of Leading Circle. I'm the mother of 2 girls, an 8 on the Enneagram, aka the Challenger, happily married to my business partner, Brent, love connecting with nature, and have put in well over 10,000 hours circling with other women. On this podcast, we will explore how to embody the brave woman so that you can take action on your dreams and desires, unapologetically speak your truth, and live life on your own terms. Grab a seat and a cup of tea, and let's get started.
The Brave Woman Podcast is brought to you by Sistership Circle, a worldwide organization that offers leadership training for women to start their own women's circles. Do you feel called to start a women's circle, or are you currently leading one and want to make it even better? Jean Shinoda Bolin, author of The Millionth Circle, said that the opposite of patriarchy is circle, and the tipping point for change is when we have 1 million circles on the planet. It's true. When women gather, magic happens. Women's circles are the new yoga, with stars like Jennifer Aniston coming out publicly that she's been in a women's circle for years. If you've been wanting to start a circle to bring women together in your community because you desire connection and a place to belong, or you have an existing business and want to create more community around you, then Sistership Circle has a free book for you to get started. This book will simplify the process and inspire you to get out there and put your circles on the map. To get started today, go to sistershipcircle.com/podcast-book. You'll see the clickable link at the bottom of this episode's show notes. And now, on to our show.
Hi, sisters. Oh, I think I've hit record and stop at least 10 times getting started in this conversation because it feels so big. It feels so massive. I'm kind of like, where do I start? I realize that the place to start is just connecting you and I, whoever's listening, sister to sister. That's what this podcast is all about, is I am here to inspire and empower you. And a big piece of that is sisterhood and us as women feeling connected to one another. So one of the things that I do not like about doing a podcast is that I don't get to have a dialogue with you here. It's just me talking. As a circle leader and facilitator, I'm more of a facilitator. Like, I love to sit in circle and to hear the women and to share stories. And for me, it's the interaction. Like, that's what makes circle so important in my life, is this back and forth, this dialogue. And so what I would love is to invite you to come and connect more in our Facebook group. I've been asking a lot of questions lately and just creating more of a dialogue because we're going into more of this online virtual world. And I've been online for a while, but what I'm finding is more and more people are coming online. We want that connection, right? How we can create that connection is through circle. It's when we actually show up on a call together, when we are able to interact on Zoom or Skype. So that's how I want to start this episode, because that's one of the key pieces to circle and why I do what I do in the world. The other big reason of why I do circle and why I am so passionate about 1 million circles on the planet is because of the conversation that we're having today around balancing the masculine and feminine energy on the planet. And what does that mean? What does that look like? Why is this such an important conversation? We can get really tripped up with these words, masculine and feminine, there's this conversation out there that I see all the time on Facebook. Well, what if we don't call it feminine leadership? What if we don't call it masculine and feminine? And just these qualities, right? But for me, in using the words masculine and feminine, it gives us some context and it gives us a framework and a way in which we can talk about this. So we could replace the words, right? We could say, let's get rid of masculine and feminine and just talk about these qualities. We're going to dive into that on the podcast episode, but there's just something for me that helps me to wrap my head around. It creates some context for me in understanding what's happening on the planet and why Circle has become so relevant and why there's women's marches and why women's work is so important. These words, masculine and feminine, really help me to navigate. Okay. So I'm going to use that. I'm just going to create that disclaimer of not so much talking about men and women, and I'm not talking about roles. I'm using these words as these energies that are within ourselves, and it doesn't actually matter what our sexual orientation is, what our gender is. It's these specific energies. Okay. As we are having more of these conversations in the world around gender and sexual orientation, and it's like there's this fluidity now of he, she, they. It's like, oh, well, let's just throw out masculine and feminine, or we could just use it. So in this conversation, if we can create that context, and then you can do whatever you want with it, right? Like if it doesn't resonate, throw it out. And I've got some notes here, so I'm going to be playing with my notes here and walking through. I've been doing a lot of research over the years as I have dove into circle work and I have immersed myself in sisterhood. What does it mean for me to be a woman? I came across this book called When God Was a Woman. And how did we get to this place of patriarchy, of the majority of senators and corporate leaders being male, that we've never had a female president? This is the first time we've had a female vice president, but still not a president. How did we actually get here? When we're talking about this imbalance of masculine and feminine, we can see that it feels like there's more of this emphasis and focus on the masculine. But I actually want to make a tweak to that and say that it's actually the imbalance is not just between masculine and feminine, it's between toxic and divine masculine, toxic and divine feminine. And so that's really what I am referring to when I talk about this masculine and feminine imbalance on the planet is the word toxic versus divine. So for me, the patriarchy, and what do we mean by the patriarchy? It's a set of institutions in it, this way in which we view the world from this masculine, but I think it's more toxic masculine way of ruling the world. And so back to this book of When God Was a Woman, this woman, Merlin Stone, did all this research on when it wasn't actually before patriarchy. And this goes back to the story of Adam and Eve. This goes back to the goddess culture that was way back. And to be specific, she says, the great goddess, the divine ancestress, has been worshipped from the beginnings of Neolithic periods of 7,000 BC until the closing of the last goddess temples about 500 AD. So think about it. Where are we now? We're in 2021 AD. So for 1,500 years, we haven't had like the goddess temple open. And that there has been some authorities, according to her research, that would extend goddess worship as far back in the past as the Upper Paleolithic age of about 25,000 BC. So what the heck happened? Why did these goddess temples close? Why is the goddess not really in the mainstream modern culture of today? That to me is patriarchy. And so what's happening now that the goddess is back, the goddess is rising, women are circling, women are stepping into leadership. This conversation is really, really interesting to me. And why now? Why is it coming back now? So what was really interesting that she quoted in the book is this other book that she found called In the Dominant Sex that was written in Germany in 1923. The authors asserted that the sex of the deity was determined by the sex of those who were in power. So back in the day that they're saying women were in power, the roles were actually reversed. It's like, okay, well, how then, what was the change here? What she found is that the female was above the male. So it was like this very tribal culture. Then there were these tribes that were male dominated, that were focused on the male, that were focused on the male god, that came and started to cause wars and try to have this takeover. So she's sharing how these tribes then essentially through violence, through suppression, all the things that we see today, destroyed a lot of that old culture. That pretty much has been the story up until now. We have seen the story play out of domination and control through violence. In the next episode, I want to actually go deeper into how this has played out with the witch wound. I think that this is a really relevant conversation. So I'm not going to go so deep here because I want to go more there. But everything, the history books, everything was switched. Even the Bible. We were taught, and she shares in the book, even as a young girl, I was taught that because of Eve, when I grew up, I was to bear my children in pain and suffering. This comes from Genesis 3:16. I will greatly multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain, you shall bring forth children. Yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Okay, interesting. So she's saying that as if this was not a sufficient penalty, instead of receiving compassion, sympathy, or admiring respect for my courage, I was to experience this pain with guilt. The sin of my wrongdoing laid heavily upon me as punishment for simply being a woman, a daughter of Eve. To make matters worse, I was also supposed to accept the idea that men, as symbolized by Adam, in order to prevent any further foolishness on my part, were presented with the right to control me and to rule over me. According to the omnipotent male deity, whose righteousness and wisdom I was expected to admire and respect with a reverent awe, men were far wiser than women. Thus, my penitent, submissive position as a female was firmly established by page 3 of the nearly 1,000 pages of the Judeo-Christian Bible. There it is, right there. That is the relationship between the toxic masculine and the toxic feminine. Men are superior. Men are to dominate. They are wiser. They are better. As women, we need to be submissive. We need to be in guilt. We need to see ourselves as being wrong, of sinning, and we're foolish, and they get to rule over us. So right there is the imbalance. Men are more powerful than women. Here we are. with this religion that is, I would say, the majority of people in the world today have been taught this story, and it has been ingrained and embedded into our culture. This is big. This is why, as women, we try to be masculine. We try to be like men. We have completely disconnected from our superpowers as women. We don't even really know what divine feminine means, right? And there's just massive confusion and fear and doubt and guilt and shame. Oh, what has emerged over the past 1,500 years is this dominant culture of patriarchy with violence, war, suppression, dominance, conquest, and the symbol of God that is outside of ourselves. This male symbol of God as son, as outside of ourselves. As a result of being in this culture, as women, what we have been taught is to be martyrs, to be submissive, to be weak and docile, be the good girl, be nice, be pretty, be the ideal woman, which essentially means don't get messy, have it all together, be super mom, and see yourself as the weaker sex. And so this just keeps perpetuating this. It just keeps happening over and over, where it's just this power over people, this dominance mentality, this competition and scarcity. And it just doesn't work. Look at the world. Look at the state of the world right now. We see everyone like split in half. Oh, you're a Trump supporter, therefore I must cancel you. Now we're in this cancel culture. Are you kidding me? Complete division and separation. We have forgotten what it means to be human, what it means to be connected. We have forgotten that we are actually connected with all that is. There is no separation between me and you. There is no separation between me and the earth. We are one big ecosystem. And yet we are remembering. And yet the goddess is arising. She's coming back from the dead. It's this resurrection, what I call the feminine uprising. The thing is that we as women are fully responsible for the patriarchy. This is not something outside of ourselves. This is not something to blame on men. This is not something that is outside. It is inside of us. It is the inner patriarch. It is this imbalance of the toxic masculine and feminine within ourselves. If you listen to the last episode with Stephen Brooks, and he talked about, he's like, I need to be the change. It's not Monsanto. It's not Chiquita Banana. It's me. I'm the one eating bananas and my Cinnamon Life cereal. I'm responsible. So as women, I think the first step here is for us to really get that no one is coming to save us. This is not on men to change. This is not on our government to step up and be different. We cannot assume that the government is going to do anything for us, or that the government's even going to change because of a new president. It's a system. This is a systemic issue, and no one is coming to save us, which means we're responsible. Now, this can bring up a lot of stuff. It can feel like a heavy burden. It can feel helpless and hopeless. It can feel impossible. The thing we want to do is to blame and find the they out there that can be responsible for this. But guess what? We as women, we're upholding this patriarchy. This is actually all on us. It's all on our shoulders. We are the ones who continue to show up and say yes to it. We are the ones who continue to bow down to it. We are the ones who continue to keep our mouths shut. So this imbalance is really are in balance. And for us to change it, we need to shift our relationship with the responsibility around it. We have cultivated toxic masculine traits and qualities within ourselves. We're the ones raising our children. We're the ones raising the next generation of men. We are the ones. So what does this mean? What does this mean that we've cultivated these toxic masculine traits? Well, we've bought into this whole notion of working hard and climbing the corporate ladder, trying to be independent, trying to be the self-made hustler, trying to join the boys club, putting all of our worth into the external, that by achieving some type of external outer success, we are then worthy of looking for the answers outside of ourselves, of placing authority outside of ourselves, of no longer really claiming our sovereignty. And so it's this old warrior culture from way back when tribes were warring against each other. The warrior of dominating, of conquest, of violence, of I am going to take what I believe is mine because I am a warrior of God. And so this warrior, like, push through, be focused on the external, all about like getting and taking and raping the earth. That's what we bought into that. We're part of it. Or if we're in complete rebellion and like, no, we've accepted our roles as the housewife or the mother. Essentially, the damsel in distress. Essentially, Eve, who is going to be submissive because Adam is the better half. Actually, she's not even a half. She's just a rib. She's just a rib. She's not even half. And that's the thing. It's not just even the better half. We are just a rib. So are we going to buy into that story? Or are we going to change the story? Are we going to create her story instead of his story? And this really goes back to when God was a woman, the goddess. Because the goddess, what does the goddess represent? The goddess is the Shakti energy, the life force. She's everyone and everything. She is within me. She is within you. So if the goddess is within me, I am a goddess. I am sacred. I am divine. I am powerful. I am sovereign. And guess what that means? I am my own authority. So if I actually can shift the symbol of authority from the god to the goddess, then I'm shifting the authority from outside of myself to within. And that is where we change everything. Because when I am feeling sovereign within myself and I'm trusting my inner authority, I know that I have the answers and I don't need to be looking out there. Then I can start trusting my truth, my intuition, what I'm feeling. And I can start questioning what I'm out there as truth. I can start to see that this is all things that I learned from a patriarchal culture that actually maybe isn't the truth. It's something that I learned. And if I learned it, I can unlearn it and I can learn something new. And that, to me, is really exciting. This is not a dismissal of the masculine, not at all. But it is an end or a healing of the toxic masculine. So where we've gone as women that feeds into this imbalance is the emasculation of men. And what I mean by that is we cut off men by the balls and we say, well, you've been calling me weak. Well, guess what? I'm going to make you weak. I'm going to get back at you. I'm going to play this nasty game with you. So the ways in which we emasculate men, and this is so up for me. This is so alive. Alison Armstrong talks about this all the time. This is the whole body of her work is around us as women no longer emasculating the men in our lives. But I noticed this coming up again in my relationship. How I emasculate my man is I don't let him help me. I got it. I can do it all myself. I'll figure it out. I can handle it. I can never receive anything that he tries to give. If he tries to say something, I dismiss it. Nope, that's not the answer. No, you're wrong. Stop arguing with me. And we're in this back and forth constantly. And I'm like, why are you always arguing with me? And so I'm sharp with him and I cut him off by the balls. And then what happens to him? He loses his sense of power. And then we're in this competition. We're in this who's better, who's right, who's wrong. We're in that patriarchal system within our relationship. And that to me is like, I don't want that. That doesn't feel good. And it's because I'm feeling that sense of like, I'm not safe. I have to fight for myself. I have to prove myself. I'm stuck in that. And I'm tight. And I'm controlling. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. As women, in the suppression and the oppression that we've experienced through the generations of the losing of our power and the power over, we want to try to find any way to have control. And so what we do is we try to control the men. And then we see this in the media. We see this in the TV of the woman who just is making fun of her man, emasculating her man. It's funny. And so the men in our world today are confused. What does it mean to be a man? I don't know. This is what we discovered in our Honoring the Masculine and Feminine events that we've done, where we have a group of women, a circle of women, and we invite a circle of men to sit in the middle and for them to actually have a conversation with each other around what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be in brotherhood? What does it mean for me to be a leader in the world? And the women just hold space and witness and listen. And there's so much confusion for men today of, so I'm a bad guy if I'm a warrior, but so I'm going to be soft. And then I'm like this playboy. And then like, am I a lover? Or does that mean I'm weak because I'm more feminine? And like, they're just trying to navigate this. And so men are suppressing their divine masculine and they're completely cutting off their divine feminine. And most men today are just completely checked out. That is pattern of we check out, we numb out through alcohol, through drugs, through shopping, through porn, through sex, through TV, through whatever it can be, that we don't have to feel this confusion, feel this self-doubt. We don't have to feel this inner tension between our masculine and feminine. The women are like, well, where are the men? This is what we hear all the time in the women's circles. Where are the men? So let's put the men aside for a moment because, and this is why circle is so important. If we want to see a change, us as women need to first work on ourselves. Because if we're fully responsible and we can step into the balance of divine masculine and feminine within ourselves, we will shift our relationship with the men. So let's just put them aside for a moment. It's not about bringing them into circle. It's about us coming into women's circle, coming into sisterhood by ourselves to remember and to reclaim what it means to be a woman, to remember and reclaim the goddess within ourselves. Then from that place, in our full sovereignty, then we can deal with our relationship with men. But first, we need to talk about this inner struggle. And so what I see And yesterday we had our Business Circle call, which is our level 2 training after our How to Lead Circle program, where women are starting their first circle gathering. Then we're teaching women how to create a long-term circle container of like 8 to 12 weeks. One of the things is if you want to put your circles out there and you want to attract more women to your circles, you need to create some power partnerships with other influential women leaders in the world. That collaboration is key. But if we're coming from our wounded, toxic masculine, then number one, we're feeling like we're somehow not good enough to be connecting with other powerful women. We are afraid that they're somehow going to let us down, that they're going to be competitive with us, which is just all the patriarchy, right? Because the patriarchy took out sisterhood, had us thinking that other powerful women, like we had to separate the powerful women, because if all the powerful women get together, then they're going to take the system out. So it's this division. If you're a powerful woman, then I'm not powerful, that less than, right? So just like we put Adam above Eve, we put other powerful women above ourselves and we put them on a pedestal. And that doesn't work, right? So what if instead we saw each other as equal? And so circle actually becomes the antithesis of patriarchy, because if patriarchy is symbolized by one having power over another, kind of the pyramid, right? One has power over the other. The government has power over the individual. The king or the president has power over the people. Adam has power over Eve. This tribe has power over that tribe, right? Then what we're doing is, well, I don't want to create that with another woman. And so I'm going to dim my light. I'm going to be small and I'm not going to show that I'm powerful so that she doesn't feel competitive or threatened by me. Because the whole system of patriarchy is all around violence and threatening, making others feel unsafe. That's how we win the game. That's how we conquer the land. That's how we become a more powerful state. So that's what we do in our relationship with other women. And so here it is of if circle is the antithesis of that, what that means is that every single person sitting in that circle is an equal, regardless of their status, regardless of their experience, regardless of their accolades or their accomplishments. We are all equal, have a unique gift to offer to everyone else in the circle, to the circle itself. That word gift, that we each have our part to play. We don't have to be everything to everyone. What's my part? What's my piece to own, to contribute? That then allows us to be in this, I don't need to be give, because I've got my one piece. If I'm in a circle of 12 other people, then I contribute my one piece to the whole and to everyone else. And they're all contributing their piece and I get to receive. But we're missing this piece because we have been taught that patriarchal culture, that way of being of competition, everything's scarce. I have to try to then be everything to everyone else, not working. So what we were talking about on the call is if we can then have that conversation with other leaders of, hey, do you want to be part of this? So that we could demonstrate what real and authentic sacred sisterhood looks like, where we're all contributing our gifts and we're supporting each other. And hey, this might be my event where I get to shine, but guess what? The next one you get to shine and I get to support you over there, but you still get to contribute your gift over here. That is true feminine leadership. That is the divine feminine coming together because there is no competition. We're all abundant. We all have a gift to contribute and to add. And we're all in that state of giving and receiving. We're sitting in that place of equal harmony, working together, collaboration, co-creation. Because that's what we're doing with the divine, with the goddess. If the goddess is within me, I'm co-creating with her. And I'm co-creating magic. there's a goddess in each of those women who I'm collaborating with and I'm partnering with, wow, are we powerful? That is exciting. That is the example. So now it becomes about this mission and this cause of demonstrating this new paradigm, this new way of being. And what if then we're interacting all the time with others in that way? We're not seeing others as competition. We're not comparing to others because we really own our gifts. We own our worth as the piece of like what I'm here to bring. And honoring that within you because you've got the goddess within you. So you're bringing your piece. So we're all bringing our piece. And this requires a level of vulnerability. And this requires a revealing of ourselves. That has gotten lost in the patriarchy. Because if the patriarchy is all about war and dominance over and power over, you have to conceal your weaknesses. You have to conceal your plans so that the enemy doesn't see it. There is no revealing of the truth. It's a lot of lies. It's a lot of facades and masks that we have to wear in war to win over, right? So vulnerability, revealing yourself, being your true authentic self, no. But if we're wanting to show up in a co-creative, collaborative space of circle, you betcha we have to reveal our truth. And we need to know what our truth is, what our gift is, what we bring to the table, to the round table, to the circle. That is showing up in full trust of the magic, of the mystery, of what wants to then come through in the circle. That is the divine feminine. So really, it's all about this. The world that we live in is all about knowing, certainty, planning, strategy, mission-oriented, conquest, dominance, linear. And there's nothing wrong with linear, and there's nothing wrong with strategy, but there's a toxicity about that and an imbalance in that because of what it's all about at the end of the day, which is win the war. It's been win the war against Iraq. Then it was win the war of terror. Now, guess what we're in? Another war, a war against the coronavirus. Do you see how that works? What if we're no longer at war? And what if we're in trust of the cycle of life, life and death? What if we're in trust of the mystery, the divine feminine, and that life actually works? We then become harmonious with that flow of life. But in a patriarchal culture, in the toxic masculine, we're just trying to beat life. We're trying to control, manipulate, and make everything fit within our world. We're not in trust of life's cycles and rhythms. We're not in trust of others, of the divine. We've lost all of that. There is no trust. That comes back to that trusting within ourselves. When we can trust ourselves, trust the goddess, trust the divine. I am divine. I have the answers. I don't need to know them right now, but I trust in the unfolding. I trust in the process, and I surrender to that. Wow. Magic and miracles can then show up. But we're in this forcing, pushing against, resistance to the flow of life because we have to control it. So this is about cultivating trust, cultivating the divine feminine. Like I said before, it's about remembering when God was a woman, reclaiming that power within myself, and then reigniting it, feeling the pulsating energy, that Shakti life force that we've dimmed, that I can spark that passion and that fire and really get how powerful a creator I am, and that I have this creative life force within me, and using that to then speak my truth, to then stand in my truth and my sovereignty, right? So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like to remember, reclaim, and reignite the divine feminine within us that can help to create this balance in the world. So number one is our sexual sovereignty. And this is a big one. If we look back at the Isis temples or even the Khajuraho temples of India, what do we see? We see that sex is actually a way of connecting with the divine. Sex is sacred. It's not evil. It's not dirty. You shouldn't feel guilty about it. But the church, what's happened? This patriarchy has said, if you have sex before marriage, you're a sinner and you should feel guilty. If you have pleasure with sex, you're a bad girl. You're a slut. You're a prostitute, right? Who's been called a whore? Mary Magdalene. Who was the virgin? Mother Mary. So we've been conditioned to think that if we enjoy sex, if we get that it's actually our connection with the divine, and we learn sex magic, that we are then somehow evil, a witch, and a sorceress. We've been conditioned to be part of patriarchal sex, which is all about the man's orgasm, all about his pleasure. Forget yours. So coming into sexual sovereignty is starting to understand the power of your chalice, of your sacred bowl, where all your lady parts are, is understanding that this is a portal to the divine. Understanding that sexual energy is your Shakti life force, and really claiming and owning that this is your body. No one is to tell you what to do with it. No one is to touch it without your consent. This body is your temple. And so your sexual sovereignty is coming home to your body and home to your sexual power as a woman. You're the Holy Grail. That's it. You are it. Number two is to reclaim your voice. We have been cut off. And every time I'm doing healing work with women, it's that they feel it, the constriction in their throat. They feel like they can't speak their truth. And that truth is your needs and your desires, what you want, what you need as priority, as primary, instead of you constantly doing everything for everyone else, making everyone else happy except yourself. Because we've been conditioned to be the selfless martyr, the mother martyr, the docile housewife, barefoot, cooking in the kitchen, right? You're allowed to have desires and needs, absolutely. But it's not just about you identifying those needs and desires, but speaking them, speaking up for yourself, setting boundaries. The third thing, your magic. Remember that the goddess lives within you. That Shakti life force energy is within you. Your intuition is your superpower. Your ability to feel subtle energy, emotions, is your magic. And how do we reconnect with that? Is through ritual, through ceremony, by understanding our relationship with the moon, with the earth, the cycles and rhythms, tuning in and syncing up with that, of reconnecting with the animals and the plants, with Mother Earth. That's our magic. That these plants are magic, all of them. That we can tune in and use that to tune into our own magic, our own truth. Number 4 is sisterhood. For us to remember the power of the collective. For us to reclaim our belonging, our right to be in the sisterhood. For us to reignite the power of us coming together in circle. Sisterhood is so powerful because when we gather and we bring all this feminine energy together, woo, we are unstoppable. It's immeasurable what we can do. One of my favorite feminine leaders is Lema Gaboe, who used the power of sisterhood to stop the war in Liberia and win the Nobel Peace Prize. She couldn't do it alone, but she could do it with her sisters. We can come together and support one another. We no longer have to feel like we have to carry all of that responsibility on our own, because we don't. But as a group, as a collective, as a sisterhood, it's much lighter for us to hold that responsibility of shifting this imbalance on the planet, of reclaiming our power. So women's circles are an integral key part to that, because that's where we get to practice sisterhood. That's where we get to see the mirrors of our brilliance in our sisters who we're gathering with. And this is why we need women's circles. Yes, it's super powerful when we come together co-ed, and this is coming up a lot for our facilitators of, I'm having all these people asking why men can't come and why I'm not doing co-ed. It's because women, we need to remember, we need to own and take radical responsibility for our part in the patriarchy and come back into our sovereignty and come back into our power as women rising together. Because that's how it was when God was a woman. That the women came together in the temple and did the ritual together to bring that magic forward and to say no, to set boundaries on what isn't aligned with that truth. So 1 million circles, that's the tipping point. Jean Shinoda Bolin talks about this, that we had to get to a tipping point when we can topple patriarchy. That is the solution. When we have millions of women gathering, and she thinks it's 1 million circles. So if we're thinking like 10 women per circle, we're like, yeah, like that's a tipping point. Well, like 100 million women. Wow, that's a whole nation, because everyone has that equal seat in the circle, and it's balance. A circle is perfectly balanced. It's not lopsided. One person's not in the hierarchy. It's balanced. It's equal. The symbol of circle is the balance of the masculine and feminine. And it's where we come into alignment as women. And then we can extend that out. Because when we are in circle and we're loving and connecting with our sisters and we're seeing them as our mirror and we're learning to embrace our shadow and our light, we can then extend that to our men. We can then go out into the world and have compassion and yet rigor with the authority. We can have compassionate accountability for the men to show up and feel supported by each other and take that stand together of like, this is how it's going to be. Speaking our truth, using our magic. And the thing is that when we are in our powerful divine feminine, we're like the flower. And what happens? The flower blooms. She sits there in her beauty and her brilliance, and the bees come. That's the magic that we have. So it's like, no, you can't dominate over me. No, I'm not okay with this. And don't you want this instead? This incredible, juicy, magnetic, beautiful feminine that just makes you feel so good? Well, guess what? You play this game with us, and yes, you can have some. And that feels really yum, right? But it's in our power, our sovereignty. And it's setting boundaries and like the things we will not tolerate. So no, you cannot have the pussy if you're going to continue to act that way. Nope, you're not going to have that. But when we're together in numbers as a sisterhood, that's when we can actually speak up and say no. It's very hard for a single individual woman. She can't tip the patriarchy. She can't do it alone. It's in numbers. It's when we stand up together and say no more. So the last piece is, again, this is not a dismissal of the masculine or that there's something wrong with the masculine, but it's about the divine masculine then coming into balance with the divine feminine. It's about honoring the masculine. And so this comes back to this beautiful ritual. We had this ceremony of the honoring the masculine, where the women were in a circle with the men in a circle in the middle, sharing. We honored them and we celebrated them. Because at the end of the day, the divine masculine is here as a container, as the flagpole of support. The divine masculine is here to provide, protect, and procreate. Let's go to those first two: provide and protect the feminine. The healthy divine masculine is here to serve. When the feminine, when women and everyone then is like really honoring the divine feminine and really bowing down and exalting it, that's when the divine masculine can show up to protect that and no longer be in scarcity or dominance to try to get the feminine to procreate, but to really serve and to honor and to see the exquisiteness, right? So we have to cultivate that divine masculine within ourselves, the honoring of the masculine within ourselves, and coming into sacred union within ourselves, honoring all parts, honoring the yin and yang, honoring spirit and matter, honoring Father Sky, Mother Earth, and then coming into that right relationship, sacred sexuality with whoever we choose. But this really comes down to, first, again, that sovereignty piece, that sense of self, because the masculine is that relationship. It's relationship. The mother is about the needs. The father is about the relationship, the providing and protecting, right? The sense of self, the trusting of self, the coming into sovereignty is, again, that self-authority, self-worth, self-integrity, responsibility, spine straight, backbone, coming into that alignment, setting boundaries, coming into the right relationship with ourselves and others, trusting in the higher power, trusting in others, trusting in self. In circle, how we get to practice this is honoring the container of the circle. And this is what we teach at Sistership Circle. That's really like a key piece of what we're about, is the structure, the curriculum, the focused intention, how we use the timer, all these things to create a really solid and safe, sacred container. That's the masculine, the safe container. The way in which we protect the sacredness that's the feminine inside, the magic within the circle. So I'd love to hear from you. What is the divine masculine that you really want to cultivate within yourself? If you look at those 4 things for us to really cultivate the divine feminine of sexual sovereignty, voice, magic, sisterhood, which one really stands out to you? I'd love to hear. And next week, I want to go deeper into this, into a very uncomfortable conversation around healing the witch wound, which just kind of plays on this of this balancing of masculine and feminine energy on the planet, and this piece that has really held us back from our power as women. If you just listened to this show, I'd love for you to leave the Brave Woman podcast an honest review. Reviews help podcasts like this one grow, making it more possible for me to devote my time, energy, and money to its production. If you take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@sistershipcircle.com, we'll send you one of our archetype activations as a thank you gift. If you like this show and have been watching for a while, or even this is the first one, I have an ask of you. This feels vulnerable, but I know I need to model the brave woman every day in as many ways as I can. Here's my ask. This podcast costs a lot of time, money, and energy to produce it. And in order for it to be sustainable over the long term, I need financial sponsorship. A simple way for you to support is by buying me a cup of coffee. Cute, huh? If everyone who listened bought me a cup of coffee for $1, $3, $5, it would cover the cost of production. So you can do this at sistershipcircle.com/coffee. Thank you so much for your love and support. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, How to Lead Circle is starting the week of March 29th and is our signature program to guide women through a step-by-step process to get their women's circle on the map. This program is deep and profound, and you can learn more at sistershipcircle.com/how-to-lead-circle, which will also be posted on the show notes. Up next, I'm going deep into one of the most triggering yet potent conversations for spiritual women today that is critical to the rising of the divine feminine and you reclaiming the medicine you bring to the world, healing the witch wound.